Stan Laurel didn't attend Oliver Hardy's funeral, and the world was stunned. For fans who had grown up laughing at the duo, it seemed impossible to imagine one part of the pair missing such a critical moment.
Well, we get an awful lot of pleasure in making pictures and appearing in public and enjoy each other. Stan is the funniest thing in the world to me, and he thinks I'm funny.
You compliment one another.
Well, he thinks of things for me to do, and I think of things for him to do.
Newspapers speculated about arguments, rivalries, and bitterness, but the real reason was far more private and deeply emotional. Behind closed doors, there was a story of friendship, health struggles, and heartbreak that only a few knew.
Well, it looks like we're in it. Gee, I wish I could go.
In this video, we are going to reveal the true reason why Stan Laurel stayed away from Oliver Hardy's funeral. They were comedy's most unforgettable duo, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. Two men who couldn't have been more different, yet together they created magic that changed comedy forever. One was tall and thin, with a look of puzzled innocence permanently etched on his face. The other was round and confident, walking like a man who had everything under control, until life proved otherwise. Together, they found a rhythm of laughter that would echo for generations. Their perfect timing, unspoken chemistry, and effortless chaos turned them into Hollywood's most beloved duo during the golden age of comedy. But behind the bright lights and humorous routines, they were two men facing private struggles few ever saw. Their story began in 1921, when fate brought them together on a small silent film called The Lucky Dog. It wasn't a hit, and at the time, no one expected much from it. Stan played a poor man who gets robbed, while Oliver played the crook. They barely shared the screen, and had no idea that one day they would make history. In those early years, both were simply trying to survive the unpredictable world of silent films, taking whatever roles came their way, hoping for steady pay and a chance at recognition. Stan Laurel's roots were deeply theatrical. His parents ran a playhouse, so the smell of the stage was part of his childhood. He joined Fred Karno's famous vaudeville troupe, the same company that launched Charlie Chaplin's career. Working as Chaplin's understudy, Stan absorbed every movement, every pause, every expression. Without realizing it, he was mastering the art of silent storytelling, a skill that would later define his genius. When the troupe toured America, Stan stayed behind to pursue his film ambitions. He took small acting and directing roles, constantly learning and improving. Each project taught him something new: how timing shapes comedy, how a single pause can make an audience laugh. Oliver Hardy's path was completely different, but led to the same destination. He started as a singer before moving into vaudeville and eventually silent films. Everyone called him Babe, a nickname from his barber that stuck for life. By the 1920s, Hardy had appeared in hundreds of films. He wasn't a major star yet, but he had a gift. He could make any minor role unforgettable. When Hal Roach Studios officially paired Laurel and Hardy in 1927's Pudding Pants on Philip, everything clicked instantly. There was no forced effort. Their chemistry came naturally. Stan's innocent confusion played perfectly against Oliver's pompous charm. Stan would blink, frown, or glance at the camera in despair, while Hardy puffed up his chest, trying to maintain control amid chaos. What they shared wasn't just comedy. It was a language only they could speak. Over the next 20 years, they made over 100 films together, each packed with laughter that transcended dialogue. They didn't rely solely on jokes. They created humor through timing, movement, and emotion. Their theme music, the Cuckoo Song, became instantly recognizable. Just a few notes could make audiences smile, anticipating a storm of silliness. Critics admired their balance, the dreamer and the dignified man forever orbiting each other. Their fame spread worldwide. European audiences adored them like national treasures. Even decades later, in 2005, British comedians voted them among the greatest comedy acts of all time. Proof that genuine laughter never ages. But even legends face the passage of time. By the late 1940s, the world was changing. After the war, audiences wanted something new. Slapstick was fading, and theaters once filled with laughter grew quiet. Their final film, Atoll K, in 1951, marked the end of an era. Production was chaotic. The script was weak, language barriers caused confusion, and both men struggled with health issues. It was a painful conclusion to a brilliant partnership. Yet, despite the struggles, their legacy endured. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy didn't just make people laugh. They showed that joy could come from simplicity, timing, and two opposites working in perfect harmony. The film meant to celebrate them fell short. For the first time, laughter didn't come easily. It wasn't that their magic faded, the world around them had simply moved on. Even when the cameras stopped, their friendship remained. Through success, illness, and heartbreak, their bond stayed strong. But for Stan, that bond led to a final silent decision that fans would question for decades. Stan Laurel made millions laugh, yet off-screen his life was far from peaceful. He was consumed by work, entangled in complex relationships, and driven by a perfectionism that never allowed rest. His troubles often began where his heart was. His love life was a cycle of passion, misunderstanding, and heartbreak. He married 5 times, but to only 4 women, as one marriage happened twice. Each began as a romantic dream, but often turned into public chaos. Before he became famous as half of Laurel and Hardy, Stan's first great love was May Dalberg, an Australian-born actress. They met in vaudeville, and for a time were partners on stage and off. May was fiery, unpredictable, and jealous, often causing trouble. She claimed to have helped Stan choose his stage name, changing it from Arthur Jefferson to Stan Laurel, because it sounded more professional. The name stuck, but so did the problems. May became overly involved in his work, interrupting rehearsals, arguing with directors, and creating embarrassing scenes. Producers at Hal Roach Studios eventually saw her as a liability. Producer Joe Rock offered her a settlement rumored to be around $10,000 on one condition. She had to leave Stan and never return to the U.S. She accepted, and for the first time in years, Stan finally felt free. But emotional scars don't disappear with money. His later marriages brought little peace. In 1926, he married Lois Nielsen, and for a time it seemed stable. They had 2 children, but fame and endless work tore them apart. After Lois, he married Virginia Ruth Rogers, then divorced her, then married Vera Shuvalova, a Russian opera singer, only to marry Ruth again. It was a cycle of love, regret, and second chances. Stan wasn't cold or careless. He was restless, always seeking calm but rarely finding it. His deepest love was his work. While Oliver Hardy took a more relaxed approach, trusting directors and scripts, Stan felt compelled to control everything. He was the creative engine of the duo. Though his name rarely appeared in credits, everyone at Hal Roach Studios knew Stan shaped the films. He wrote jokes, edited scenes, and reworked scripts, always chasing the perfect moment to make people laugh. Colleagues recalled him spending hours in editing rooms, adjusting timing by fractions of a second, convinced that even one misstep could ruin a joke. He would rehearse scenes endlessly, discarding them if they weren't perfect. For Stan, comedy was engineering. Every stumble, glance, and hesitation was meticulously planned. His obsession with perfection made Laurel and Hardy timeless, but came at a cost. The pressure weighed heavily on him. While Hardy could leave work behind and relax on the golf course or at a party, Stan carried the burden home. He was always sketching new gags, rewriting scenes, or calling editors late at night to tweak details. As their fame grew, so did the expectations. Fans expected perfection from Stan every single time, and he took that responsibility very seriously. The pressure began to take a toll on his health. He developed diabetes, and by the 1940s, heart issues started to slow him down. Even as his body weakened, he refused to step back. Stan's sense of self was so closely tied to his work that he couldn't imagine life without it. Even when he was too ill to perform, he continued writing ideas for sketches and films that would never come to life. The fame that once lifted him now felt like a heavy burden. Hollywood was evolving rapidly, and the style of comedy he had devoted his life to was gradually fading from the spotlight. With sound films and faster storytelling taking over, the slow, gentle humor of Laurel and Hardy began to feel old-fashioned to younger audiences. Stan felt this more deeply than anyone. It pained him to see the art he cherished, the one he had built so carefully, slipping away from the public. Every setback hurt, and every triumph seemed fleeting. He poured his heart and soul into making people laugh. But when the laughter ended, all that remained was silence. A silence only he truly understood. From that quiet pressure and pain would give rise to some of the most shocking moments in comedy history and the controversies surrounding this beloved duo. Fame had turned Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy into the world's favorite pair of fools. Yet behind the charm and laughter, life off-screen was far more complicated. Behind their smiles were whispers, rumors, poor decisions, and emotional wounds even close friends often ignored. Stan Laurel was always the more serious of the two, especially about his work. To him, comedy wasn't just a job, it was an art. But that same intensity often spilled over into his personal life, blurring reality and gossip. Over time, talk of his drinking began to surface. Some who knew him said he struggled with deep sadness, particularly during slow work periods or after painful breakups. The man who could perfect every frame of a film suddenly couldn't fix the chaos in his own life. Friends noticed him withdrawing, drinking more, trying to calm the anxiety that came with both fame and failure. His health was fragile, and the stress of staying relevant only worsened it. Those close to him described a man torn, proud of his achievements, yet haunted by the fear that the world was moving on without him. Even at the peak of his career, people said Stan could be difficult. Some at Hal Roach Studios claimed he wanted control over everything, from scripts and props to lighting and costumes. To Stan, comedy demanded precision, and every detail mattered. But not everyone agreed with his approach. His perfectionism, they said, often drove people away and tested Hardy's patience. To some, it seemed less like dedication and more like tyranny disguised as passion. Meanwhile, Oliver Hardy faced his own struggles, though he kept them hidden behind an easy smile. His personal life was filled with heartbreak. He married 3 times, and none of those marriages ended happily. His second wife, Myrtle Reeves, battled alcohol issues, and their relationship was a storm of arguments and exhaustion. Hardy, with his gentle nature, often forgave too easily, trapped in a painful cycle of love, guilt, and frustration. The happy man audiences saw on screen was far from the one who went home each night. Financial troubles followed him as well. Hardy was generous, always willing to help a friend. But that generosity came at a cost. He spent freely and trusted people who didn't always have his best interests in mind. Taxes piled up, debts increased, and sometimes he had to accept smaller, less glamorous roles just to stay afloat. Though he rarely complained, the burden slowly wore him down. Despite all this, fans continued to see them as the joyful duo who had once ruled the screen. To millions, they weren't just actors. They were symbols of laughter, friendship, and pure joy. Their on-screen innocence became their identity. Few could imagine the truth. Two aging men, both struggling with health, disappointment, and fading fame. Their chemistry was so convincing that many assumed conflict between them was impossible. But behind the scenes, things weren't always smooth. They argued over scripts, creative decisions, and who should have the final say. Stan's serious, detail-oriented approach often clashed with Hardy's easygoing style. Sometimes they barely spoke off camera, saving their words for the moments when professionalism kept the magic alive. Even through disagreements, their bond never completely broke. Fans were fascinated by their friendship, and some wondered if it went beyond partnership. After years of traveling, performing, and relying on each other more than anyone else, they shared hotel rooms, finished each other's sentences, and seemed inseparable. To the public, their closeness appeared deeper than friendship. Rumors emerged that their relationship might have a romantic side, though there was never any proof. Those closest to them said it was simply brotherhood, an emotional connection built through years of shared struggle, laughter, and success. Still, gossip never fully disappeared. Perhaps it persisted because their on-screen chemistry was so believable that audiences couldn't accept it as mere acting. Over time, the line between public image and private reality became harder to maintain. Both men faced personal challenges, Stan with his health and restless energy, Hardy with health issues, financial stress, and emotional fatigue. Even so, they continued smiling for the cameras, posing for photos, giving interviews, and maintaining the illusion that Laurel and Hardy were the same beloved duo. But behind those smiles, life was changing. The laughter that once came effortlessly was slowly being replaced by pain. Soon, Hardy's struggles would become too heavy to conceal. His decline was one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking stories. The man who spent a lifetime making the world laugh began to fade before everyone's eyes. The cheerful, round-faced comedian, with the confident grin and signature bowler hat, slowly became a frail shadow of himself. Years of overwork, unhealthy habits, and physical strain were catching up with him. The change was painful to witness. Hardy's weight had always been part of his comedy. The big man trying to stay in control, while his smaller partner Stan created chaos. Off-screen, however, that same weight became dangerous. By the 1940s, it posed serious health risks. Reports indicated he weighed over 300 pounds, and decades of touring, performing, and filming had taken a toll. What fans saw as lovable roundness was actually a sign of poor health. In 1954, Hardy suffered a mild heart attack. It wasn't fatal, but it was a wake-up call. For the first time, he had to confront the reality he had ignored. His health was failing. Determined to change, he followed his doctor's advice and began a strict diet. Over several months, he lost more than 150 pounds, a transformation so dramatic that friends barely recognized him. When he reappeared in public, fans were shocked. The jolly, plump comedian they had known was gone. His face looked thin, clothes hung loosely, and his once bright eyes seemed weary. Rumors circulated about cancer or a mysterious illness, though Hardy never confirmed anything. He remained kind and polite, but a sadness lingered in his eyes, as if he knew the audience no longer saw the man who had made them laugh for decades. His weight loss changed his appearance, but it couldn't undo years of damage. Decades of smoking and poor diet had already worn down his heart and lungs. Smoking was part of Hollywood culture then. Actors smoked on sets, in dressing rooms, even during breaks. For Hardy, it became an addiction he couldn't escape. By the time doctors warned him of the consequences, it was already too late. His body had been pushed too hard for too long and was slowly giving out. Heart problems, weak lungs, and constant fatigue made movement difficult. The man who once chased Laurel across rooftops and tumbled down staircases for laughs could barely walk without help. Movie offers stopped coming, not because audiences had stopped loving him, but because they wanted to remember him as the lively, funny man he had once been, not the frail version he had become. He declined public appearances and chose a quiet life at home with his devoted wife Lucille, who cared for him tenderly during his final years. Then, in 1956, tragedy struck once more. Hardy suffered a massive stroke that left him paralyzed and unable to speak. For a man whose life revolved around expression, humor, and timing, it was devastating. He was confined to his bed, too weak to respond when Stan Laurel called or wrote to him. Their friendship, once full of laughter and shared dreams, fell into a painful silence. That stroke effectively ended Hardy's career. He would never act again, never appear on camera, and never share the stage with Laurel, as he had countless times before. In August 1957, things took a turn for the worse. Hardy suffered 2 more strokes in quick succession. His body could no longer fight. On August 7, 1957, Oliver Norville Hardy passed away from cerebral thrombosis at the age of 65. News of his death spread quickly, sending shockwaves through Hollywood and fans worldwide. Tributes poured in from every direction. Actors, comedians, and filmmakers who had grown up watching him shared memories of his kindness and unmatched comedic timing. Newspapers described him as a gentle giant, a man who made people laugh with warmth rather than mockery. Fans who had loved Laurel and Hardy for decades felt like they had lost a dear friend. Across the globe, old theaters replayed their classic films, and audiences laughed through tears, cherishing the joy he had once brought them. Hardy's death was more than just the loss of a man. It marked the end of an era. The golden age of slapstick comedy was already fading, but with Hardy's passing, it felt like the final curtain had fallen. His absence created a silence that even Stan Laurel could not fill. As the days passed, everyone waited to see the one man who had shared nearly every moment of Hardy's life. But when the funeral day arrived, something unexpected left everyone stunned. Oliver Hardy's funeral took place on a warm August day in 1957 at Valhalla Memorial Park in North Hollywood. It was a simple, quiet service attended by friends, family, and colleagues from the past. Reporters and photographers gathered outside, waiting for the expected sight. Stan Laurel saying goodbye to his lifelong partner. But he never appeared. The seat reserved for him remained empty, and soon his absence became as much a story as the funeral itself. The reason behind it was heartbreaking. By the time Hardy died, Stan's own health had also declined. Years of hard work, stress, diabetes, and heart problems left him frail. He was living quietly in Santa Monica, writing letters, and trying to recover both physically and emotionally. When he heard of Hardy's death, it struck him in ways few could understand. Insiders later revealed that the news hit him harder than anyone could imagine. This wasn't just the loss of a friend. It felt as if a piece of his own soul had been torn away. Attending the funeral wasn't simply a matter of choice, it was a matter of survival. His doctor had warned that the emotional strain and physical exertion could easily trigger another collapse. Stan's body was already fragile, and even if he wanted to attend, he knew deep down he couldn't endure the service. When asked why he stayed away, his answer was simple, yet powerful. Babe would understand. Babe was the affectionate nickname he had used for Oliver Hardy throughout their decades together. That one line conveyed more about their bond than any long explanation ever could. Stan also understood fame. He knew that if he appeared weak and heartbroken, the headlines would shift from Hardy's memory to a spectacle of his grief. He didn't want cameras capturing his pain. That day belonged to Hardy, and nothing, not even love, should overshadow it. But the world misinterpreted his silence. Newspapers filled the void with rumors, claiming the two had fallen out or ended their partnership on bitter terms. Some even accused Stan of pride or guilt, saying he couldn't face Hardy's death. Fans wrote letters, confused and heartbroken. How could one half of Hollywood's most beloved duo not be there to say goodbye? Those who truly knew them understood the truth. There had never been a fight or bad blood. In fact, during Hardy's final months, Stan often reached out to Lucille, sending comfort and checking in for updates. Their friendship remained intact, even when illness and distance separated them. After Hardy's funeral, messages of sympathy poured in from fans worldwide. Yet Stan kept his grief private. When pressed by reporters, he simply said, "I lost my best friend." Even confined by illness, he continued writing. Sketches, jokes, little scenes, many still featuring Hardy's name alongside his own. It was as if he couldn't imagine creating anything without him. Every idea seemed to end with Hardy's character waiting just off screen, ready for a cue that would never come. After Hardy's passing, Stan quietly retreated from public life. The stage that once brought him joy now felt empty. He refused every offer to perform again. Believing that Laurel and Hardy could only exist as a pair, he instead surrounded himself with memories of their journey. Photos, letters, scripts, all reminders of a partnership that had defined comedy itself. Though he never performed again, Stan continued to write. His desk overflowed with unfinished ideas, each one marked with his unmistakable humor and heart. Writing became his quiet way of staying connected to the art and the friend he had lost. He also responded to fan mail with warmth and care, often typing long, heartfelt replies to people who had grown up laughing at his work. Visitors described him as kind, humble, and deeply nostalgic whenever he spoke of Hardy. In 1961, Hollywood attempted to honor him with an Academy Award for Lifetime Achievement in Comedy. But true to Stan, he chose not to attend. He had never sought the spotlight. His joy came from creating laughter, not receiving applause. Stan Laurel passed away in 1965 at the age of 74, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape generations of comedy. More than a master of laughter, he was a man who loved deeply, created selflessly, and remained loyal to the very end. So, what do you think? Was Stan's absence from Hardy's funeral an act of love or something more? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.